Vampire Therapist is a gothic visual novel where you play as Sam, a vampire cowboy looking to help other children of the night through their trauma. We sat down with Cyrus Nemati of Little Bat Games to discuss inspirations, work processes, and what the future of Vampire Therapist looks like. Welcome to DevTales.
I am Cyrus Nemati. I am the creative director at Little Bat Games. You might not also know me as a voice actor who did games like Hades and Pyre and a bunch of other smaller point-and-click adventure games. That's where I got my start. But I started Little Bat Games a couple of years ago, and we just released our first title, Vampire Therapist, just a week and a half ago, or probably 2 weeks or so by the time you're watching this.
Vampire Therapist
is
a fantastic game. I've got to say, I loved every second of playing it. The characters especially have wriggled their way into my brain. And I now catch myself with my patterns of thinking. I have Sam's voice in my head.
Yeah, the same thing happens to me, honestly. I didn't actually plan on this, but as I was developing the game, I noticed that the same thing was happening to me, where I was recognizing these cognitive distortions in my own thought patterns. And I've been in therapy for a very long time. A really long time. And I've heard all of these terms before, and I hear them in therapy, and I say to my therapist, oh yeah, I get it. I'm disqualifying the positive, or I'm exhibiting a control fallacy, whatever. And then I go out of therapy and I forget everything that we just talked about, because, we're all in the moment there. But in developing this game and writing it, I had to keep them in mind at all times. I always had a couple of sticky notes up on my desktop that had all of the distortions that I was using, so I was thinking about them constantly. And now I catch myself all the time. And of course, since I do a bunch of the voices in the game, I'm doing it in the accent half the time. And I'm like, oh, dang it, Cyrus, you're doing some labeling again. It's really very useful for talking about, through any issue.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a similar thing where I was going through therapy, and I've had the same thing. Like, it gets mentioned to you, but you're so caught up in the moment, you don't kind of take it in. So playing through the game and going through sort of the repetitiveness of catching characters out and realizing, oh, that's labeling behavior, or that's a bit of Nosferatu thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I think the sort of relaxed environment of playing a game and learning at the same time definitely helps you take it in more.
Yeah.
And having like fun characters do it rather than an actual therapist, I think probably helps quite a lot of people. So I wanted to kind of ask about your inspirations as to why you wanted to make a therapy game, and why you sort of chose vampires to do it with.
Yeah. Well, vampires were a great fit because they're immortal. They don't die. And one of the main reasons I wanted to do a game about therapy was to really show that therapy is something that we all can use. And if we are living in this world with our computers and our cars and all these unnatural things to our biology, we need some sort of coping mechanisms for it. And that doesn't make us lesser in any way. It's the most normal thing in the world to need therapy. And it always has been. And that's where vampires come in, because vampires have dealt with these very human issues for all of history. The things that the characters in Vampire Therapist are facing are not new. They're telling themselves the same distortions 400 years or 2,000 or 3,000 years ago that we're using now. So it's a great way of showing that these things are part of humanity, not just of us right now or of vampires, but these are historical problems. And as somebody with like a more, I would say history major in college, which doesn't really do much for anyone in most cases, but I actually used it to great extent on this game. And I had a lot of fun doing this kind of research.
Yeah, you've included a lot of like historical characters in the game.
Yeah.
Was that a bit of like a passion thing for you, or, what was the drive for picking the certain people that you did?
Yeah, I usually, when I'm writing, I start with the punchline first. Like, what is the funny thing about it, and how can I go backwards from that? So in this modern era of algorithm-based media production, I wanted somebody who had a vested interest in art. which is why I settled on Isabella d'Este as a Renaissance patron who had funded Leonardo da Vinci and Andrea Mantegna and Michelangelo. And I wanted to have her take a modern look at art. And the nice thing about using historical figures is that there is so much complicated history that is very difficult to make up. Everything that is described in the game about her life, her challenges with her husband, with her sons, with her lineage, this is all real history. And I worked with her historian who translated 16,000 of her letters. And I actually read all of them. So the voice that you hear in the game is really hers. Like, she's really, really critical of the artist that she's working with and of herself. And she has this very fine line to walk with her husband, it being, the late 1400s. So I think it really enhances the richness of the game to have these real elements in there. And it's just fun to research. And honestly, like, the historian was so excited to hear from somebody who's interested in this historical character and is bringing them to life here in 2024.
That's so cool, especially like you got to read her letters. You got to see exactly what she's like. It's not like you read a Wikipedia article on her and thought, oh, here's what she would be like. Like, you have the exact records of the way she spoke and perceived herself.
Yeah, sometimes I want to go into her Wikipedia and, like, since I have firsthand knowledge, I'm like, that's not true. That's kind of a guess. And I'm like, I would like to go in and edit it, but I feel like I'm not, I don't have the academic background quite to do it. I just know that some things are just supposition or wrong, or there's just no evidence for them. But no, it was such a privilege to go through all those letters and read them in her voice. I mean, how often does one get to do that for a historical character?
It must be quite interesting to discuss with historians and also licensed therapists about why you were making a game and everything to do with it. Can you, like, explain a bit of your process about how you reached out to these people and why you sort of chose the people that you did?
Yeah. Well, I went with a therapist that was kind of newer in the industry, like, because they had just gone through all of this process and done all of the more recent studying around it. So therapy is always changing. So having somebody who is more on the cutting edge is really helpful for this kind of thing. In terms of the historians, it was just like blind outreach. And I thought, if I can do this, I would like to do this. And for the most part, that went really well. But again, it started from, what is entertainment? What is entertaining for the game first? That's how I picked the characters. That's how I picked the therapeutic element. And I wanted something that was easy to relate to, easy to play, and that you could just jump right in and really learn about these characters. So I made sure that I was working with my consultants throughout the process, just with little checks throughout, making sure that am I doing honor to both the therapy and the history.
Was there any inspirations, either historical or in your own life, that inspired Sam? I love Sam so much. He's like such a wonderful character, and the way he talks just always puts a smile on my face, because I can so clearly imagine him in like a goth nightclub in Berlin.
Yes.
Or like, even going to like Camden in London and walking about and being like, why is this all about? And
right.
I love him so much. I have to know the inspiration behind Sam.
Oh gosh, well, the original main character was Andros, and I have some old scripts where he was the guy, and I love him too, but he is too old and wise. He makes reference to it later in the game where he says, I think your clients are more comfortable with you than they are with me because they want to impress me or they're intimidated by me. Sam was specifically created to counter that problem with Andromachos. And when I looked into the history of the time and like discovered the influence that the transcendentalist movement had in the United States, like this was a counter to, more of the life that we live these days that is based on societal standing more than anything. And the transcendentalists asked, what do we actually need as human beings? What do we need to feel fulfilled? And it's not the sort of things that we are constantly striving for in modern society. It's attunement with ourselves, with nature. And so having him be a part of this movement and walking through America I thought was like, a really, really great start to ensure that he was going to be a more introspective character that was less concerned with these societal goals. And also, I needed a character who was learning along with the player. Somebody a little bit more simple, who can just be very earnest. And I think that's the thing that works about Sam, is that he doesn't know a lot. He learned to read, I think 30 years after he died. So he's not all that well educated. He became more well read later in his life, and he read the same book over and over again while walking in the woods. But I think this was a great place to start for players to be in the same place as Sam would be in.
Can you tell me a bit more about the process behind Andromahos? Because obviously he was meant to be the original main character. Yeah. So what sort of elements did you put in for him that maybe would have made the players link to him a bit more, if you know what I mean? Like, Sam is very easy to play as because you're learning at the same time as him. But did you have anything in the works that would make you become a 3,000-year-old ancient vampire?
Well, I think the answer is no, which is why it was good that I moved away from him. Really, it started with, frankly, he's got to be hot. I mean, it's vampires. I don't have to shy away from this stuff. So that was the original thinking for him, and indeed, he's on the face of all my marketing. But that was the first point. In terms of making him relatable to players, I used some of the same techniques that I did with Sam. I wanted somebody who was reformed, who had done a lot of bad stuff and had somehow come out of it. The story of Andromahos had started where he just was constantly being a very evil presence in the world. And one day this isn't in the game, and I don't even think it gets discussed in any of the background stuff, but he walks into the ocean where he doesn't die, he doesn't have to breathe, and he just keeps walking. And he goes to the bottom of the sea, and he sees a new world that no human has ever seen before because he doesn't die. And then he gets this inspiration that maybe life isn't what I have thought it has been for the past 2,800 years. I'd certainly like to explore that in future content, but I just like the idea that somebody undead can see entirely different worlds than we can see.
I love that. I think that's such a nice story for him, finding new things. It's like sort of seeing the light almost, but that's a very sensitive term for a vampire.
Absolutely. I mean, seeing the darkness. I mean, the idea was that he was going to go to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and see all sorts of weird critters and think like, oh, well, that's really interesting. This is not the world that I see above.
Maybe life isn't so bad.
yeah. At least I'm not like a heat vent sucking polychaete worm. Life is okay.
One thing I really want to know about is your characterization. So I'm a voice actor myself, and your performances were just stellar. I loved them. I thought they were fantastic. I just want to know a bit more about how you chose the personalities for each characters, how you got into the characters. Dr. Drain, for me personally, was my highlight of the game. I am a big Dr. Drain fan.
Awesome. Yeah, Dr. Drain was... well, again, I start with a punchline. And the punchline for Dr. Drain was, what if I could, I start with this, more, the David Mitchell with Richard Iowade sort of voice, right? And I thought, what if I made them sexy? And it's such a weird thing to conceive of, which led to this, well, not to go into too many spoilers, but having this other side of the character come out. So I started with that. I start with what is going to be an entertaining voice, and certainly this David Mitchell, Richard Iowade character is, popular in its very nerdy way, and it allowed me to go into some of the more scientific aspects of neuropsychology, which was a lot of fun to explore and talk through with my therapist as well. For Edmund, it was, similarly, it comes from what is my funny inspiration. In this case, I am very into Hugh Grant in his old stage, where he's constantly playing these over-the-top villains. I love this kind of character, and I thought I went and saw the Dungeons and Dragons movie, and I'd already seen Paddington 2, and I loved it. And I saw this one, and I'm like, okay, I had another character in mind. I actually don't even remember who it was back then, but I threw it out and I said, no, we're going to do an actor. I really want to do an actor.
I love that. It's now you mention it, there's the D&D movie. I can definitely see sort of that campy over the top.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's
so
very
good.
theatrical. Like as I was designing the game, I was going over this with my partner, and I have this curtain in the game between scenes, and the curtain is being fixed like today, actually. Like so it'll be smoother. But the game actually has a very theatrical feel to it generally that I wanted to lean into, because I feel that this is kind of a dialogue with the audience. And I see players first and foremost at Little Bad Games as audiences more than players. Like I start with that, and what is the chief thing that one wishes to do with an audience? It's to entertain. And if you can entertain and inform as well, then you're going to have a good show. But I think leaning into the theatrical really helps ground the game, which is why I have some of these elements in the game.
Yeah, a lot of the characters are very obviously theatrical. It's a game. You can turn up the dial, but they are still so relatable. Like a lot of them, I was sort of listening to their problems, and then I sat there on the sofa like, oh my God, wait a second.
Yeah, no, that's that universality that I was speaking to earlier, that the problems that any human is facing, these feelings of inadequacy, these feelings of, am I enough? These are not new problems. So I really wanted to go into it with each and every one of these characters in their own ways. Like, there are elements of myself in all of the characters and struggles that I have had. I'm not quite Edmund Keane, but I put a lot of value in art and entertainment and its ability to get us talking about things that we wouldn't normally be talking about, like therapy.
What is your favorite character from the game? I gotta know.
Oh, that's a good question. I think that when I finished Dr. Drain, the way it ended, I felt like I was actually doing therapy. Like I completed the script and I'm like, yes, like this is working. Like I get it. Like he's had a real journey. I was so happy with that story. Yeah, I mean, I love all of them, but I think Dr. Drain was probably the first client that I came up with. And I actually have, I just have it on my desk here. This is actually one of the first scripts where I was both exploring the character. I was exploring the character, and I had written some early scripts around him. And he definitely changed some, but all of the elements were there quite a long time ago. That's
so cool. Like I said, I'm a big Dr. Drain fan. Every time I had a therapy session with him, I was just like, yeah, I get to see him again. He's the one that I felt like I got through to the most. He gives a very good sense of like achievement in his story.
Yeah.
And yeah, without spoilers, just the duality, so good, so well written.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that him being a scientist was a really good start, just because like he's going to take a more practical method, and I wanted to, like, in the first session that you see in the demo, he's starting out with a very scientific perspective, which is like, okay, let's skip the feelings, go right to the solutions. But that doesn't work. The feelings come from somewhere, and it can come from a scientific place, certainly, but the feelings are the thing that are impacting your behavior, not the biology.
I feel that's how therapy works. You go in there and you go, oh, I want a solution. So tell me what the solution is right now, and then we're done.
Yep.
But you very quickly realize, oh no, I'm here for the long haul. Like it comes from yourself, that you've got to work on yourself rather than any external factors. Like in Dr. Drain's story, he was saying to Sam, well, okay, tell me what I need to do, then I'm done, and I won't see you again. And then 4 weeks later, he appears again, and he's like, well, that didn't work. So what now?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's one of these elements of therapy that I wanted to really bring out as well, is that, yeah, we do go in for particular reasons. In therapy, it's called a presenting problem, the thing that actually brings you into therapy, the problem that you want to fix. But it's never really about that. It is definitely a journey at all times. And sometimes it's just, it's just a symptom of a more underlying problem. And if we actually look into ourselves and where our fears and insecurities are, we can actually get to work there. Fear drives really everything that we do in many cases. We learn these the things that we fear most, we learn very young as children. We get into a lot with Edmund, where most of his stuff as a child actor was ingrained very early. And because of the level of fear that he picked up, it makes those insecurities so much stronger. But it's really about them, not about the symptoms.
Yeah, and it's lovely to work through the characters with their problems. Like I said,
it's easier to do it to someone else than to ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. But you end up seeing parts of yourself in these characters and the way they talk. You know, Sam was definitely a big thing for me with like the labeling, because I feel like I do it quite a lot. I think everyone does it quite a lot, and you think nothing of it. You know, you do something that you're not entirely happy with, and you're like, well, I'm just an idiot. What's the point of trying? Is that something that you wanted players to do? You wanted them to go away and think about the way they behave with themselves?
Actually, that was more of a bonus. Like from the beginning, what I wanted was to normalize therapy. Like that was the primary goal, really. But when I started playing as the game started really forming, I started noticing this phenomena happening where the application of therapy helped me apply it in myself, and then I started seeing it immediately in players as well. It's a huge bonus that people are seeing themselves in a better light. I probably could have predicted it, but I think at the beginning, I didn't know how long the game was going to be or what form it was going to take. It was all about what did the characters need, which is how it ballooned into the thing that it is now.
That's so nice. I'm seeing that you're getting like a lot of comments on Twitter and Steam saying, this game helped me.
Yeah.
So that's just must be so incredible that you just came up with this like vampire therapist game, and now you're having people contact you and being like, well, I now know how to look out for my own bad behaviors. Yeah,
no, it's really heartwarming. And I think that, I was very careful about the script and the way I talked about these sorts of things. Like Andros says it all the time, that cognitive distortions are not tools to beat ourselves with. They are normal. We are all doing them all the time, which is why like later in the game, when you get to pick your own cognitive distortions, it doesn't matter what you pick because they're all going to be there. And that was really what I wanted to share, is that this is the most normal thing in the world. And if application helps in that aspect and people feel like they are more aware of when they are using these cognitive distortions, that is like a tremendous honor. I've had outreach not only from players, but from academics who have thought like, oh, this would be a great thing to do, but how do we do it? Well, the way you do it is by telling some bawdy jokes and making things very silly. Like that's my philosophy. This is my contribution, because I can't do it any other way. I used to work like in politics, and I'm too fiery for it. They won't have me. They don't like me there.
With the part of the game where you start picking your own cognitive distortions, and you saying that it doesn't matter what you pick, they're all there, they're all okay. That sort of ties into the sort of no fails part of the game. Andros will jump in and say, no, let's have a think about this. What else could it be? And I personally really enjoyed that aspect of the game, because to me that is the therapy aspect being predominantly the main feature. You don't want to be a therapist and say something wrong and then it all goes horrible. So was the no fail saves, is it, like I just said, is you're there to learn about therapy and help people rather than it being about Sam himself and his, not just his journey?
Yeah. No, it was designed that way from the beginning. I did not want fail states at any point. I had experimented with one where I think there was something in Edmund's first script where I had you get something like he gets offended and he leaves, and I put up like the Dark Souls, you died a really long time ago in parentheses, and it just seemed, it felt like a dead end. Like that's not what I ever wanted. And I've definitely had some complaints that there isn't enough of this, branching narrative where you can fail, but that's not the game. It's definitely challenging, for sure. Like you have to learn 13 different cognitive distortions. It's not just because you can't fail doesn't mean there isn't challenge in the game. But the learning and the story was much more important to me than, having one of your patients go walk out into the sun. That doesn't feel good for a therapy game. And I am absolutely unrepentant about that choice. If some people don't like it, this is probably not the game for them.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it because when I got to the part where I was like picking distortions by myself, I was like, I remember sitting at one of the screens, I think it was with Dr. Drain, and I was like,
yeah.
If I get this wrong, is he going to just go? Is he going to leave? Have I ended this quest line with him? And then when I clicked it and I got it wrong, and then Andros came in, I was like, oh, thank God. Like,
yeah, no, that was really important to me that, people can just have fun no matter what they pick. They're either going to get a little bit of an urging in the right direction, or they're going to get something funny. All the simple choices in the game that you pick, there's no getting those wrong either. If you want to click something that's funny, go ahead and click the funny thing. I really wanted to have some tutorialization of that earlier in the game, and I ran out of time. But I want to encourage players to pick funny things and get funny answers. Like, I come from the games that I grew up with were like LucasArts adventure games, where there weren't fail states, and you would never get punished for saying something funny. And I just wanted to do a game with a bunch of jokes, so I don't want people to miss out on them.
With the aspect of like putting in jokes in the game and making it a bit lighthearted,
yeah.
I know a lot of your inspirations were What We Do in the Shadows and Horrible Histories.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you sort of pinched little bits of inspiration from them and mix them together? Like, I grew up on Horrible Histories.
Oh, wonderful.
So I really love seeing that as an inspiration for you. And I am a super fan of What We Do in the Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely see, the nightclub that you're in reminds me a lot of Naja's. So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about little bits of inspiration you got and why you chose them?
Well, I've always loved parody more than anything else. I grew up with Mel Brooks as well, and you can see a lot of Mel Brooks in this game, because what parody does is that in order to do it properly, you need to really know your source material. Like Tenacious D is a metal parody, and they know metal really, really well. Horrible Histories employs it all the time, as does What We Do in the Shadows. They use all of these vampiric tropes that we know, and they know them really, really well, and they're able to turn them around and make them funny. So it was this kind of approach that I wanted to take, where like, okay, it's important for me to know all of these elements as intimately as possible. Same with humanity, because then I can start to make fun of it, and make it and do it in a lighthearted way, where like it's all like vampire stuff, like in What We Do in the Shadows, is all about the absurdity of what being a vampire is. Like, they shouldn't have normal lifestyles, and just playing with this and really turning it on its head was, a really good starting strategy for making sure that the game was as silly as it could be. Because I think when you are dealing with intense psychological issues, and these are all real issues in the game, I think those edges really need to be sanded off. I play a lot of games myself, and I've played plenty of games dealing with mental health, and they can be very effective and very impactful, but they can be difficult. They can be really difficult. Like, even I wouldn't necessarily call it a mental health game, but like Last of Us, for instance, I will never play that game again. It was really good. It was a great experience, but like, I'm not going to touch that again. I'm not going to touch Hellblade a second time. Like, these are really intense, and I wanted something that would just be fun to play again and again. And starting with parody, I think, was the best way to make sure that I maintain that vision.
Did you have any inspirations from games that incorporated mental health?
No, actually, because of that problem. They tend to be very intense, and I wanted to really be the opposite of that. And vampires are a really good vehicle for that, because most of their traumas are very old, and that means that they can make fun of them. Medi, the fourth character that you meet in the game, as part of her backstory, she was alive in 3rd century Ireland, and because of what society was at that time, she was sold to a rival warlord. That, of course, is traumatic, and of course is horrible, but she makes jokes about it. because that is what we do with trauma, like over time, is we make a lot of fun of it. I do it all the time with my own traumas. Like, it's absurd. It's silly. The things that we do to each other because of our insecurities. After a while, especially after 100 years, 120 years, 2,000 years, they're funny. They're absurd. And I just wanted to lean into that.
I really liked Medi as a character, actually. I thought she was really interesting because there were moments when I sort of really didn't like her, and then other moments where I really did like her.
Yeah.
And I think the moments I didn't like her were sort of maybe because I became very attached to Sam, was the way that she spoke towards Sam.
Yes.
But her whole backstory was just so interesting to me. I love that you incorporated, like, she's this ancient vampire who was sold to a rival warlord, and now she's a Twitch streamer.
Yep.
Was that something that you incorporated because you thought it'd be like a bit of fun for if people were Twitch streaming a game and then suddenly there's like a parody of themselves coming up?
Really, it was more about the internet than anything else, and the effect the internet has on it. The Twitch streaming, I think, was like a very relatable element to have, and also I wanted this character to be somebody that I had a big problem. When you have a character that old, you have to fill in the backstory. So if I had to fill in 1,800 years of history, and I looked into like what would it practically be, there's a lot of difficult stuff in there. So my solution to this problem of having to fill in all of her backstory was to make her very much a loner, to make her reject humanity early on because of the stuff that it did to her. And so like having her more reclusive, having her relying on the internet was both a way of getting to take some shortcuts with the character and get right to the meat of it, but also to focus really on how the internet has affected us as a society. I don't think we've really studied it enough, especially in the post-corona era, where we are more reliant on these services than ever, and the demands on us are absolutely insane. So focusing on the internet and what algorithms do was really important for me to explore, and I want to do more of it. I have plans for future characters where I go into what does AI mean? Like, for real, like not this silly idea of AI that we have right now. There's no such thing as AI. But if we get to a point where we're actually, offloading our thought to these things, what happens? So I got plans.
Does that mean there's a more vampire therapist to come? A bit of DLC, a bit of add-on? Yeah,
if you watch through the credits, I do have a sequel planned. Hopefully, I have it all written out. I haven't checked. I only check my sales once a week because it's a terrifying thing to do. And honestly, I don't even know what to do with. I don't know how to pay myself. I don't know how to run the company. I'm just flying blind here. But I do have plans. I have future content plans. I have a sequel plan. So I've got a lot in mind for this world.
Nice. Is there anything you can tell that's not spoilery, not giving too much away, or is it completely under wraps? No one's allowed to know.
Probably more under wraps, other than the fact that I do want to explore AI and what it's done to us. And if you get to the end of the game, you'll know where it's set as well. So it will deal with different problems than what you've seen in Vampire Therapist 1.
I would love you to tell us two things. One, talk about your game in a single sentence, and then tell people why they should play your game.
Right. Okay. In a single sentence. Fine. Yeah. Vampire Therapist is a comedy game about healing the immortal undead of their ancient issues. And the reason that you should play it is because you will learn something about yourself. Vampires are humans. You are human. So by helping them, you will also be helping yourself in some ways. And you're just going to have a fun time. You're going to laugh. You're going to experience a lot of emotions in this thing, but it's all done gently and all done sweetly. So I think no matter who you are, you're going to have a good time with it. If you like it, if you have enjoyed Vampire Therapist and it made you feel something, or if it made you look at yourself with more kind eyes, then leave us a review. We're a very small studio. This is our first game, and we're flying blind in a lot of ways. But the more support and demand we get, the more we can do with our world. I would love to localize it. I would love to port it, but these are things that I need support for, and for that support to come through, I need demand. So yeah, I want to bring this game to as many people as I can.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's been great coming on, and yeah, it's been wonderful to see how the game has been affecting people. So thank you so much.